Hey, I've got a show rec for you. This month, the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra on January 26th at 7:30 p.m. will perform Norwegian Fantasy. Ukrainian violinist Vladislava Luchenko will make her debut at the Capitol Theater playing the Eduardo Lalo piece. And gotta say, Luchenko will perform on a violin from the year 1710. Tickets are online at overture.org/WCO. Today on CityCast Madison. Y'all, we've been trudging through these storms. I hope you've been able to get around town safely and stay warm inside. And speaking of heat, there are a few bills in the state capitol that may pass soon that could impact how you get your energy. One bill deals with electric vehicle charging stations, and the other could decide who gets to power our state power grid into the future. We sat down with Tom Content, the executive director of the Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, to get us up to speed on these latest measures. It's Tuesday, January 16th. Happy birthday, Grandma. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Tom, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Excited to chat with you. Electrified. You could say.
There you go. We're all energized today.
Yeah, we're all energized. And there's some energy in the state capitol. Your group watchdogs power companies. And there are two bills at the state capitol that could affect us that are actively on the move. One that could make it easier to charge an electric vehicle in Wisconsin. What does this bill do?
Well, this bill actually is moving Wisconsin forward in terms of the ability to actually have more charging stations around the state, because one of the big challenges with EVs is range anxiety, which is you want to make sure you can fill up, you have enough juice in your vehicle to get where you want to go, right? And we have charging stations in the urban area in Madison, Milwaukee, and there are charging stations around the state, but there just aren't enough. And sometimes they're not all functioning at full capacity. So this bill would allow Wisconsin to qualify for $78 million in federal funding. Wisconsin was one of only two states in the whole country that won't qualify for that funding unless this bill changes. So, and what it does is it changes it so that the person charging their vehicle, the electricity you're charged by the kilowatt hour, basically for how much energy you're putting into the vehicle, kind of like with gasoline, as well, instead of just how much time you're spending at the charging station. So that's the key change in the bill.
Mm-hmm. And so right now, if you go to charge your electric vehicle, you're paying for how long it takes, not how much power you're actually using.
Exactly. And if you think about it, if you have like a Chevy Bolt, which is really a small EV, versus a Ford F-150 Lightning, which is a really big one, the amount of electricity needed to fill up those batteries is different. And so it's not really, this is really more cost-based and more accurate way to charge people who are driving their EVs.
Yeah. And has MG&E and Madison already changed some of their chargers?
They're in the process of changing it already. They had a separate issue in their rate case at the Public Service Commission. And so in that case, MG&E was proposing to change its stations, the one right on East Washington and downtown Madison, to charge by the kilowatt hour. And so that's in process.
Yeah. And the Department of Transportation had plans to, the hope is to get them on like I-94 and the major highways, right?
Exactly. So along the interstates to ensure that there's easy access and availability on the well-traveled corridors. So it's progress.
So I want to talk a little bit about like how it restricts governments, because right now, I mean, it was part of the changes that it was like utilities can offer these, but also now it's like trying to help private businesses and other folks be able to get in and add chargers is the thought.
Right, exactly. And so that there's a distinction between the level 1 and level 2 chargers and the level 3 chargers. So I think as the EV industry's evolved, you're seeing a move toward faster charging, and that's what is the really fast charge stations are these level 3s. Level 1 and 2 are the kinds that are maybe would be in your own garage at home would be a level 1, and it's just a difference of how much energy and how fast the car or truck can be charged, and often the cities, the municipal stations, municipally owned charging stations that have been in place are the level 1 and 2. And so there are provisions that kind of create some exemptions for that. But the Joint Finance Committee added one provision that could be concerning because they're not allowing any charging stations to charge for free. And one of the intentions was to enable, for instance, potentially charging stations at state parks to be available at no cost. But so that won't be allowed under the current version after the Joint Finance Committee passed an amendment. By and large, there's still some concerns with the bill, but overall, I think that the general consensus is let's make progress where we can, because this issue's been kind of talked about a lot, and there's been no action for so long.
Yeah, definitely. We talked to Madison Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, and she said that the city employees would like to be able to charge their cars when they're at work. They've got that infrastructure. For example, the city has some solar-powered chargers to make their own power. And there's kind of a question about, would this impact that? Do you know?
Right. Well, I think the most recent version is that any charger going forward is going to have to be collecting taxes on the sales of that electricity. Excise taxes. So the question that I'm still a little bit unclear in my mind is for charging stations that are already in existence, what the impact would be. But the Joint Finance Committee amendment would basically require all chargers, no matter who owns them, to require what they're saying is a quote unquote reasonable fee. So no free charging. And then the chargers would have to collect an excise tax. There may be some changes that the cities like Madison are going to have to sort through.
Yeah. I saw that representative out of Whitefish Bay talking about the excise tax. It's 3 cents per kilowatt hour. A new measure.
There you go.
Yeah. She was bringing forward a concern that basically that electric vehicles are being overtaxed because there's going to be that added to, the fast charging stations. You mentioned there's a 1, a 2, and a 3, and the third one is the one that is kind of the fastest and also the one that they're going to make that change on. She was saying okay, the electric vehicle owners are going to get taxed that 3 cents, and then also it's more expensive to register an electric vehicle. Did you hear anything about that?
That is one concern that electric vehicle owners have expressed, is that they're already being charged extra in lieu of the road tax, because the gas tax is attached to gasoline, so they're being charged extra in that way. Long term, I think that they should try to work out a solution on this. If the excise tax on charging continues in place, then there's no real need for the higher registration fees going forward. And that could be a change to work on down the road to kind of even it out.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
There's one question that's kind of boggling me, which is, I guess I'm curious, why would the state want to ban itself from running a charging station if it wanted to?
So the concern that's been raised in the Republican Majority Caucus is whether cities should be in the business of competing against the private sector in terms of owning operating these charging stations. And that was a concern that held up the bill 2 years ago. Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce had opposed the bill for that reason last time around. But this time around, even the federal funding says that a city or municipality can own the charging station, but they can't operate it. So they have to work with the private sector to make it happen if it's going to be selling electricity to the public, because that's in the kind of the federal policy now. that kind of addresses some of those concerns. But at the same time, now you're seeing this new proposal from Joint Finance where there is going to be, a requirement to collect the taxes, even if it's municipally owned.
And so it feels like this has pretty broad support. What kind of, before we talk about the other bill, what kind of last thoughts do you have in terms of like outlook and, the long-term impacts?
I think overall this has large support. I think the consensus is let's get something on the books so Wisconsin's not left behind on terms of being able to build out this interstate vision. I know Governor Evers and other Midwest states have really announced a vision for an upper Great Lakes or Midwest EV corridor where people along the interstates won't have to think twice about whether they're going to be able to charge or find a place to charge their vehicles and keep going along their destinations.
And I'm also really curious in terms of our neighbors, how are we doing? Because you said we were in a situation a second ago where we would have been one or two states that would have lost out on this funding if we weren't making the change that's in process.
Right, exactly. And even last week, the Biden administration announced a whole host of EV charging funding for local communities around the country. And both the Madison and Milwaukee areas were vying for some of that funding and did not get any in this round of funding. And one of the thought processes is it's because Wisconsin is already, behind in terms of not having resolved this one problem about charging by the kilowatt hour. It was just, I believe, Nebraska and Wisconsin were the only ones that hadn't resolved this. So let's get it resolved.
Yeah, that feels very unlike us. We're the creators of Earth Day. And, okay. Yeah, and there's another bill that's circulating that is of huge interest. It would be affecting the power grid in Wisconsin. Something I think many folks have the luxury of not really thinking about every day. You might think about it more. But this bill, it sounds like, would basically guarantee existing power utilities and transmission companies the right to develop any future power infrastructure. Can you talk about that? What's in this bill?
Yeah, there's a lot at stake in this bill in terms of being able to keep costs down for customers over the next 5 to 20 years, really, because there's a big push right now to build out the power grid to make sure that all the wind power from the windiest areas of the country, like Iowa and Southwest Minnesota and the Dakotas in our region, can flow seamlessly into urban areas and areas where the wind resource isn't as strong. So it's a real challenge because there are tens of billions of dollars on the line here that are going to be spent. And the national policy is to actually allow competitive bidding on major power line projects. Some Wisconsin utilities are trying to do is just protect their own market here and prevent competition. And it's really backwards. We just talked about how Wisconsin should be moving forward. This is a really backwards policy. And it's been proposed and found to be, it has been enacted in other states. And in some states, including Iowa nearby and Texas not so nearby, it's been found to be unconstitutional. It's a real challenge. Wisconsin, we need every tool that we can have in our toolbox to keep costs down for customers. We're seeing high pressure on rates as utilities are building more and more projects, whether it's solar projects, some new natural gas projects, some energy storage battery projects. Wisconsin alone is going to have about $2 billion of power lines that are already been approved for the upper Midwest grid operator level. Our line is that, if 51 utility lobbyists are all asking for the same thing, you might want to hold on to your wallets. So CUB is part of a broad coalition. It includes Clean Wisconsin, AARP, and it includes business groups as well as folks on the right, including Americans for Prosperity and the Grover Norquist Tax Foundation and Wisconsin Institute for Law or Liberty. So it's kind of a strange bedfellows coalition from folks from all sides of the aisle. They're bipartisan that is concerned about these monopoly utilities trying to kind of corner this market for themselves. Because they see it as such an opportunity for big profits on these projects.
Yeah, so this bill would exempt the utilities from having to do competitive bids.
Right. And
Yeah.
there are exactly. And there are already competitive bids going on around the country and even in the Midwest. Dairyland Power Cooperative actually, they just won a competitive bid for a project in western Wisconsin and the Wisconsin kind of Minnesota, Iowa area that they serve. And so the fact that competitive bidding is already happening, it's already producing savings of 20 to 30% or more on projects. It's crazy to go backwards as a state and try to just exempt ourselves from competition.
Yeah. So, Assembly Speaker Robin Vos says he thinks it would be more efficient to use the power companies that are already here in the state. What's the logic there? Do you think there's any truth to that?
I mean, I think the fact is, since 2000, when American Transmission Company was created, we've seen a lot of buildings, so people know who American Transmission Company is. There's a familiarity, and in western Wisconsin, it's Xcel Energy. But just because something's familiar to you doesn't mean it's the best option, and especially when you think about the double-digit profits that the utilities are getting, and the fact that the projects that we have seen have gone way over budget, whether it was the Wausau Duluth project that was built 20 years ago, or now the Cardinal Hickory Creek project that's running from Madison down to Iowa. It's not even finished yet, and it's gone over $100 million over budget. And what you're seeing around the country with this competitive bidding is the companies that come in and bid are utilities in other states that actually are also building power lines. It's not like you're having some muffler shop coming in to try to build a power line. But what they're doing when they're coming into states that have competitive bidding is they're proposing to cap the construction costs. And Wisconsin, right now with our projects, we don't cap our construction costs, and even the project that's under construction right now is the costs have gone well above the estimates.
And what are you watching for as these bills work their way through the Capitol?
I think we're watching to see where things go next. And on the one hand, there's consensus around that on the EV side, where the utilities and a lot of organizations that are against the other bill are in alignment on the electric vehicle bill. But the challenge is, that there's not a lot of time left in the legislative session, and it's coming at this kind of a time of potentially a bunch of turnover as well, because the chair of the Public Service Commission just announced last week that she's going to be leaving the leavers administration, and the state Senate also this week may be poised to either confirm or reject another of Beaver's nominees. So it's possible that, while the legislature is working on these two bills, that they could be setting it up for there to be two vacancies out of the three commissioners at the Public Service Commission. So it's amazing how much is going on in a compressed period of time here as the legislature winds up.
Well, Tom, we so appreciate you coming and getting us up to speed on these two bills. Pretty consequential here. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.
That's Tom Content, the executive director of the Citizens Utility Board. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with your favorite road tripper? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, stay warm.